Hello everyone. I wanted to make a comparison video between two watches I've recently acquired. So I have two boxes here. Now on the one hand, I have a Tudor Pelagos LHD 25610TNL-001 LHD standing for left-hand drive. And the other one is a Ginault Ocean Rover 181175LSILN. I hope I got that right. Also called the Smurf. So these are to some extent comparable watches, but also very different watches. Why do a comparison between the two? Well, because there's a lot of love and hate, especially for this little watch. And this watch is, I think, a watch that is tremendously underappreciated. So I wanted to make a good comparison. So firstly, the boxes. I think it would be a good start for us to make a comparison. So let me first show you the Tudor box. And Tudor, of course, being part of the Rolex group, has a very luxurious box with a beautiful, luscious wooden box with a glossy finish. Inside, of course, all the peripherals you normally get. So definitely a handsome looking box. Now I know some people will say you don't wear the box, but I think a box is important nonetheless. So yeah, looks very good, very sturdy. Definitely bang for your buck if you look at the box itself. Again, I know people will say you don't wear a box, but I think they're important nonetheless. The Ginault's box, a little bit smaller actually. If you compare the two, it's, I would say, 60% in size compared to the Tudor box. Now if you open it up, very simple layout. There is the cushion for the watch. There's, I think this is really good to have. It's a screwdriver in order to remove the little screws that are in the strap to adjust it to your own size. I've done it myself. Normally I take it to a watchmaker, but I've done it myself. It was fairly easy, so I'm happy with that. In here are other boxes and other papers. I think one is very important is the measurement criteria and a serial number and such. So very good. There's an extra strap involved. It's a canvas strap, very basic, which I probably will never use, but nonetheless, very nice that they included it. They didn't have to. So onto the watches themselves. So I took them out of the box already to make things more easy and put them on their own cushion. Well, these are my cushions actually. The original ones are in the box. Now right from the bat, you see a difference between the two, of course, in size. So let's make a full comparison and start off with the Tudor LHD and give you a little bit of background information. Now, first off, you probably noticed that I put them, I put the Tudor LHD wrong way up because this is originally supposed to be a left-handed watch, although I would argue that it's a ambidextrous watch. So it's wearable for both people who are left-handed or right-handed. And why? Well, I've had certain watches where the crown itself drills itself into your wrist here, because I like to wear my watches a little bit lower, and this basically solves that problem. Now, is it convenient when you have to adjust the time? I mean, you could argue. I mean, how much does it bother you? I mean, it's once a day, or actually once per 2 point something days that you have to adjust it. Almost 3 days, actually, because it's a 70-hour power reserve. So it's not a lot of trouble, honestly. So let's get into the facts real quickly. This is a titanium watch. It's a relatively light watch. The case itself is partly titanium, partly steel, I would say. The case diameter is 42 millimeters. The strap itself has the glide lock system, which we all know and love. And this has a very good spring system, so you can easily adjust it if you're wearing it over your diving suit or whatnot. Now, for me, it was very comfortable in the sense that I could remove a couple of lugs from the strap, and with this spring, I could adjust it to my very small wrist because I have a 16.5 centimeter wrist, so a very tiny wrist in that respect. And this was very easy to accommodate my small wrist. Other than that, it has all cream lugs. Oh, see, there I go, wrong way around. All cream lugs, all cream indents. The bezel is, I don't think it's engraved. No, it's painted on. It's ceramic, but it looks very gorgeous. It's also cream colored. The luminescence on this watch is fantastic, by the way. I have to add, it's very good. Now here you see 5 lines of text, which is a Rolex thing, of course. I like the fact that one line is red, It just breaks up the whiteness of the text. Other than that, the crown is very sturdy. There's two settings, one for time, one for date. Very strong, very firm crown, so it won't be too loose on your fingers, and that really, I think is important for a good crown. Now the movement is an in-house MT5612 automatic movement, 26 joules. It's a very good movement. As I mentioned, 70 hours power reserve is fantastic. I think this is, well, I mean, actually I had a discussion with a person recently who said that it's better to have, the standard ETA or ETA movements because they're easier to service. Yeah, I mean, if you argue, things like that, you can never buy a Rolex or a Tudor or whatnot, or companies that use their own movements. And it depends on, what you're expecting. I mean, if you're buying a Tudor or a Rolex, and you will get in-house movements, right? But if you have enough money to spend, so enough, cash to spend or burn on a watch such as these, you should expect that service costs will be a little bit more, higher than, for instance, a Seiko, standard Seiko. With all due respect to Seiko, of course, because I love Seikos. But I compare it to cars, for instance. If you buy an expensive BMW, it takes more money. It costs more money to have it serviced, and new parts and such are more expensive. If you buy a Mazda, for instance, to keep it in a Japanese comparison, it's of course much cheaper, to do it that way. So it all depends on what you're planning and what your expendable income is, basically, because not all people, are comfortable with servicing a watch, that can be very expensive to service. So think of this when you decide on buying a watch. It's also service and maintenance. I mean, there's not a watch that runs forever. All of them need a little bit TLC, right? So back to the watch. The glass itself is sapphire crystal, and has a water resistance of 500 meters. So let me show you a little bit of the watch. And this is the helium escape valve. Very, very nice. Very nicely incorporated. Now this is as new as it comes because all the most of the stickers are still, attached to the watch, because I have a little bit of an OCD kind of thing. So I hate when, my watch looks like it's used. So you won't find any mark on this watch. But this is just a very handsome watch. I keep turning and twisting it the wrong way, but look at this. This is a very nice watch. Very sturdy. It feels light, but it doesn't, it commands a certain presence, which I love about this watch. So this is a Tudor. On to our other subject. A very different watch. See, I keep rotating this thing the wrong way, or these things. This is the Ginault Ocean Rover, as I mentioned. Again, a watch that is akin basically to the Tudor in a way that, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys know the story behind Ginault, but I heard different iterations. But let me give you the iteration that I at least heard. Basically, what I heard is that Ginault was a master replica builder of Rolexes, and at a certain point, he decided to make his own, his own variation on what he believes a ideal watch would be. And I think there is a romantic element to that, because this is a person who knows the watches inside and outside, and has looked at every detail of a watch, and has basically taken a lot of these watches from the past decades and has taken certain elements and combined those into a singular entity as it is. So back to the facts. This is a stainless steel watch, polished steel on the sides, and if you compare that quickly with the Tudor, you see that there's no shine here, and here this is shiny as hell. Whatever you prefer. I mean, I like this one personally a little bit better, but this one is not ugly at all. So where was I? A steel strap as well. Now this looks familiar. Hey, that's a cloud lock system, guys. Look, almost the same. What subtle difference is because there's no Ginault logo here, where you normally have a teeny tiny Rolex logo here. Interesting. Anyway, it's a 40 millimeter watch compared to the 42 millimeters of the Tudor, which is why there is a little bit of a size difference. I can show you right here. You see? It has a black dial with white on metallic hands, and the second hand is red, which is really cool. It's a small thing to differentiate itself from the Rolex Sub because everyone is pointing to the Rolex Sub. I mean, let's point out the obvious. There is always going to be a comparison to the Rolex Sub, and you either hate it or you love it because there are people who, well, basically almost take out their pitchforks and burn in anyone that buys something that is trying to amalgamate Rolex. And to a certain extent, I understand because if you've spent your hard-earned money on a Rolex Sub and somebody comes over with a watch that looks awfully close, I can imagine that you're going to say, hey, listen, you're copying. Is it blatant copy? Stop it. I paid a lot of money. You only paid a fraction of that money. It's not fair, basically. On the other hand, there are also people who say, hey, listen, who look down on people who own, let's say, homage watches. This is what they call themselves, I believe. They're saying, the people that buy homage watches don't have enough money to buy a decent Rolex. Or they say, save up your money, don't buy that crap and go buy a decent Rolex. And the thing is, I didn't buy this watch because I wanted to come close to having a Rolex because I wasn't interested in having a Rolex. I might be in the future. I'm not saying I won't be interested in a Rolex in the future, but at this stage in my life, I wasn't interested to buy a Rolex. I just saw this watch as a separate entity, and I thought that looks interesting. And there was something that appealed to me, and it wasn't necessarily the fact that it looked like a Rolex. In fact, it wasn't actually because I'm not a horologist. I'm not an expert in Rolexes. So for me, I was a little bit oblivious to the fact that it looked like a Rolex Sub until somebody called it a Submarine, which I thought was very funny, by the way. But I mean, I'm relatively new to the watch game. I've owned Oris's, a lot of them. I've owned Seikos. I've owned, another Tudor actually, the Glamour Day Date. So but it all has been in a very recent time and in a very I think in the last, let's say, 2 years or 3 years. So I'm relatively new to the game, so I'm discovering things as I go and as I move on. So maybe come back in 2 or 3 years and I'll own a couple of Rolexes and I'll probably say I'll look back on this and frown upon it, but I respect it for what it is. So to get back to the facts, it has a black dial, 5 lines of text, all white, to basically, mimic or copy, or whatever you call it, the Rolex standard. Now, luminescence. I mentioned, I think, luminescence on the Tudor being very good. On this watch, it's fantastic. It's phenomenal. That's why I call it the Smurf, because it lights up very blue-ish. Unfortunately, I cannot show it here because of the lighting situation, and they haven't been exposed to enough light. But you'll have to trust me on this. The luminescence on this watch is fantastic. I think I wouldn't say bar to none, but I think it's very close to being one of the best out there. And again, it does hold up to its name, nicknamed the Smurf. Other than that, the crown, and that's an interesting thing because if you look at the crowns, it's a very different crown. This is more, let me put it up a little bit closer. This is more refined, as you can see. I'm not sure if this is a classic Rolex style choice, but this feels a little bit less rough. The other one feels like it's going to fall off your fingers at any moment, or the top of your fingers. However, what bugs me about this, and I might be wrong, it might be me because I'm not an expert, as I mentioned, there's 3 settings in this one, but there's only 2 functions. There's a time and a day date. And the day date, of course, with this Cyclops being very nicely visible. But there's a third, and I don't know what it does. Actually, in fact, I don't think it does anything. So I might be wrong, but I think I haven't been able to find it out, and it bugs me a little bit. It feels like an oversight. It feels like they might have dropped the ball on this, but maybe I'm being too picky, or maybe somebody's going to prove me wrong. Which, in any way, put in comments, and I'm open to listening to whatever you guys have to say. So other than that, there is a movement which they call the Ginault calibers 7275, and it has 25 jewels, I believe. Now, the movement itself is a point of debate. and firm debate, because actually I know a person who was taking apart this watch, a watchmaker actually, and he has had a look at the movement. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know, but Ginault claims to source all the materials, excuse me, all the materials or most of the materials from the US, most of them actually, maybe close to 80%, because not everything can be sourced within the US, which is logical. But the movement itself, when they mentioned, or at least I think they mentioned that it was hand built or appropriated from the US or something, we were probably collectively hoping for a Swiss movement, but I've seen the contrary. It looks a lot like a Chinese clone. I cannot 100% confirm it, but I've seen pictures of somebody taking it apart and showing a comparison with a regular Chinese clone movement. I'm not saying that Chinese movements are bad. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are pretty decent Chinese movements out there. But you can see in the pictures, and I'm sorry that I don't have those pictures now handy, but from the pictures you could see that the finishing, and I mean the screws that were used were just, they used, for instance, in one of the pictures I saw, they used the too big a screwdriver to screw in the screws, and you can see that the screws were a little bit damaged. Now, you would never see that in a Rolex. Actually, you would never probably see that in any Swiss movement watch. So, yeah, it works. You know, it's a good movement. There's a 38-hour power reserve, which isn't spectacular, but is normal. You know, is okay. But yeah. But on the other hand, at the price point that they're selling these watches, if they put a Swiss movement in this watch, it would probably become, let's say, about 10, maybe 20% more expensive. So price point also plays a role, right? The crystal sapphire, again with the Cyclops lens here. Water resistance is 300 meters. I haven't tested it because I am not a diver, nor do I plan to dive anytime soon. But who knows? I mean, I've dived once with a watch and I regret it sorrowfully because that watch was coated with PVD, I believe, black PVD, and I damaged the watch and I sold it at I would say €1,000 loss. So that's a wise lesson. I will never dive with my watches ever again. So, head-to-head comparison. Oops, be careful not to tap these two watches together. Yeah. So, why would I compare these two watches, and why do I call these watches a little bit similar? Well, it's down to emotion, and it's very subjective. I mean, some people say it's blasphemy for comparing these two watches, and it's their right. The Tudor basically has always been called the baby Rolex or mini Rolex, or whatever you want to call it, or budget Rolex. And Ginault basically is trying to emulate the Rolex feeling. So in essence, they're both, you could consider them as a surrogate Rolex watch. However, this is something people will regard with much higher regard, and I think as an investment is much more stable, and is accepted by all either Rolex or non-Rolex owners. This Ginault is a little bit of a contender in the whole business. It's a contender watch. It's something you might wear as a daily beater, for instance, whereas this I would not wear as a daily beater. Why? Because titanium scratches quite easily, and stainless steel is I think a little bit less easy to damage. And value-wise, of course, this watch is about 3 times as much, or cost-wise as much as this watch. So I would rather wear this one on a daily basis. If this gets scratched or whatever, it won't hurt me as much as the Tudor. Other than that, I think that visually you can see definitely some elements that are a little bit similar. If you look at the bezel, very similar. Also painted on ceramic. However, the difference is, if you keep it in a light like this, is that the Ginault's bezel is very shiny if it's directly in contact with light, whereas the Tudor is a little bit more matte. I'm not sure if it's been treated with some anti-reflective coating, I'm not sure, but it does look fantastic. So the Ginault is a smaller watch. It's a little bit less wide. Constructively, there are similarities between the two watches. And yes, I've seen people compare it to a Rolex Submariner, and I know that's a more direct comparison, but I wanted to compare these basically, well, I wouldn't say cousins, but let's say step cousins, you know. Um, in some way, they are influenced by each other. They're related to each other, and that's why it's so interesting to look at. So, all in all, what would I personally advise to people to buy, or which one? It depends on a couple of things. If you have enough money to spend, get both. They won't bore you. They're different enough, to differentiate in wearability, in the look and feel. I mean, I wear this watch basically as a dress watch, and this watch I can wear for any occasion at Tudor. Um, my personal taste would say, my personal preference would say that I like the Tudor much more because it's a much more unique watch. Value-wise, it will stay a little bit stronger in the future and probably go up because it's a limited run, although it won't say in any way, shape, or form how limited it is, because this is number 1600 something, but I don't know 1600 something of what. Is it 3,000? Is it 2,000? It's 5,000? Or is it an open number and they will announce a limited number at the end of the run? I don't know. This, however, is limited to 250. This is like number 54 to 50, I believe. So it's a very small number, and this is also what I like. So the collectability is there to a certain extent. However, Rolex purists will never buy this one. The Ginault is it's a subject of love and hate. You have people who are fervent adversaries to this watch, and you have people who are, very much pro Ginault and pro micro watchmakers, such as the Steinhardts and the Invictas and such. For me, I won't buy other Rolex lookalikes or homage watches because I'm not in the game of collecting those. I'm just in the game of collecting nice watches and wearing them. So it depends on what your personal feeling is. Do you want to buy a nice watch that you can wear on a daily basis and not have to look at the watch to see if it's damaged or not? Then the Ginault is your choice. However, if you're looking to spend a good amount of money on a watch that is, top quality, top brand, people know what it is. I mean, the people that know will know, and that will not bore you in any way, shape, or form, then a Tudor is definitely the best answer. And again, I'm not criticizing the Ginault in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that I would have preferred to see this have a Swiss movement. If this had a Swiss movement, I think that I wouldn't be. Actually, a lot more people would buy this watch because of that fact. Now there's a lot of controversy, a lot of rumor about what kind of movement it had. I saw it firsthand with some pictures of somebody who took it apart, a watchmaker, certified watchmaker, and again, it's not a badly constructed watch. Even a watchmaker himself is wearing one on a daily basis, and he said that was his favorite watch. He honestly said, listen, I like the watch. It's a perfect watch, but there are certain things I would have improved. What he actually did is he removed the movement with the Swiss movement. That's an interesting fact, and I think that added a little bit the little bit of extra that made this watch to I think a full-fledged quality watch. But what I do hope is in the future that Ginault will make their own designs. If that happens, I think then they'll basically reinforce their reputation. You don't want to latch on too much in the reputation of being a homage watchmaker or a copycat, as Rolex enthusiasts or purists would say. You want to differentiate yourself, and I think you do that bestly by making your own design. You can lend certain elements from Rolex or Tudor or whatnot, but be original and stay original. I think that will, in the long run, help Ginault very much because I like the watch a lot. And if they bring out their own designs, I will probably be on this like a fly, on fresh food. That's how I think about Ginault. It's bang for your buck, definitely. However, with the movement, I hope that they change. If they do their own designs and they put in a Swiss movement, I'll be the first one to buy one, definitely. Provided that it looks good, of course. If it doesn't look good, nobody will buy it. But it's as simple as that. That's my comparison video. I hope you guys liked it. Please like, subscribe, and share the video with other people so they can also see, my thoughts and opinions. If you have any questions, remarks, or whatnot, feel free to leave them in the comments. Please keep it nice because, again, I am not a watch expert. I'm just a guy who likes watches. Thank you very much. Take care.